All right, I'd like to call this meeting of the West Milwaukee School Board to order. Ms. Steele, could you please lead us in the pledge?
Sure. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Susan, please call the roll.
Yes. Mr. Sickich.
Present.
Ms. Deal. Here. Mr. Burns.
Present.
Mr. Becker.
Here.
Mrs. Kaiser. Here. Mrs. Carr's excused. Mrs. Lee's excused. Mr. Keller was going to try to join on Zoom.
I'm here.
Okay, so the first thing that we have to take care of this evening is a special proclamation, and I have representatives from West Allis and from West Milwaukee to help me with that. So I'd be prepared to Divine, you start up. Yeah, if you go up to the podium. Broken.
All right, good evening, everybody. Those of you that don't know me, my name is Dan Devine. I'm the mayor of the city of West Allis, and I am joined tonight by West Milwaukee Village trustee Steve Schutke, as well as president of the West Milwaukee Board of Education, Noah Lee. And we are here to recognize our school superintendent, Dr. Marty Lexman, with a proclamation as he retires from an incredible career in education, most recently with our district. So I will start out with the proclamation, and we're going to go in three parts as to avoid dry mouth and exhaustion. There was a lot to go through here. Whereas Dr. Martin Lexman is retiring after 8 years of service as superintendent of the West Milwaukee School District. And on this occasion, in appreciation of Dr. Martin Lexman, it is fitting to pause and reflect on his accomplishments. And whereas Dr. Martin Lexman addressed a significant budget deficit by cutting operating costs and revising business practices and procedures to ensure greater oversight, resulting in a return to a fiscal stability with a robust fund balance and an improved credit rating. And whereas Dr. Martin Lexman maintained financial stability while equitably aligning resources to support our district's mission and vision with the implementation of neighborhood schools, the transition to a new student information system, facility consolidation, building improvements, the addition of a new recreation and community services building. And whereas Dr. Martin Lexman provided consistent, transparent communication for our learning community, embarked on a critical process to create a strategic plan, conducted biannual parent and employee surveys to guide decision-making, introduced a new district logo and tagline, provided an updated online system for accessing Board of Education policies, transitioned to a new website to improve ease of access, Sunday thoughts for all staff members, and
whereas Dr. Martin Lexman fostered a collaborative and inclusive environment with professional educators, administrators, and staff recognizing their unwavering commitment to our students and their families, implementing a revised employee handbook, a new compensation model, a personalized staff development tied to student outcomes, advances in technology for staff and students. Whereas Dr. Martin Lexman remained passionate about race and equity, implementing equity beliefs related to the deeper learning framework, believing that competencies such as problem solving, collaboration, communication skills are critical for success in the workplace and in life. And whereas Dr. Martin Lexman embraced a culture of respect, transparency, and integrity that positively impacted the learning community, making way for improved social emotional learning supports, special needs programs, a project-based learning school, at-risk programming, the implementation of online charter school, and Whereas Dr. Martin Lexman remains student-centered as an educational leader, unwavering in his commitment to academic achievement and extracurricular activities, expanding dramatic arts programs, at times participating in school music performances, repurposing Lane Intermediate School for community and student athletes, athletics, and
Whereas Dr. Marty Lexman guided our schools and community through a historic pandemic, maintaining educational continuity and providing support for families while safe at home, established a comprehensive website devoted to educational services, COVID-19 assistance, meal distribution, flexible education options for families during the journey to return to school. And now, therefore, be it resolved that we, the city of West Allis, in the village of West Milwaukee, and the Board of Education of the School District of the West Allis West Milwaukee et al. Honor Dr. Marty Lexman for his contribution to our community and our district with this expression of appreciation and best wishes for a happy and healthy retirement. Be it further resolved that a copy of this testimonial be formally recorded in the official minutes of the Board of Education of the School District of West Allis West Milwaukee et al. On June 26, 2023.
Thank you. It truly has been an honor. When you hear it listed like that, I should be way more tired than I am. But that means the work is still feels good and invigorating. And even today, I had an opportunity to engage with one of our seniors over at Dodkey, and you'll see what that turned into on Friday. It was powerful. Again, just the work centered around kids is the most important work you could do with your career. And all the rest of it is kind of the background stuff that makes it happen. But I truly appreciate it. It has been an honor to serve here, and you'll see me as a volunteer as long as Janet Delicate passes my volunteer application. But I've loved it, every minute of it, so thank you.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Thank you. Thank again our representatives from West Allis, Mayor Devine, and Village Trustee Schutzke for coming in and reading part of this conversation this evening. I also want to thank Beth Kaler for helping put together the verbiage on this, and Suzette as well for helping coordinate this honor. So I think it's a good opportunity and a well-deserved opportunity to recognize Dr. Lexman. So thank you for allowing us to do that. That's great. All right, so then from there, we move on to item 7, our superintendent's report.
So we will start with 7.1, the legislative update. So there's a bill on increasing voucher and low revenue ceiling that passes both houses with bipartisan support. So this is related to the education funding. Increases per pupil payment amounts to voucher and independent charter schools, and also increases the low revenue ceiling that impacts us for public school districts. That was passed by both the state Senate and Assembly with bipartisan support. The Budget Committee approves K-12 funding plan. So, we've paid a lot of attention to this and we're pretty familiar with it. The summary of the major provisions is a $325 per pupil increase for each of the next 2 years, so the biennium budget. Increase of $154 million or 379 over those 2 years in general school aids. And then a number of categorical aids, so special education reimbursement to achieve an estimated 33.3. So it is moving the needle. It's not quite as much as we were advocating for through SWSA. But it's progress for us. There's also categorical aids in early literacy, high cost transportation aid in general, sparsity aid, school-based mental health services grants, which I'm confident will apply for going forward, and then shared school district services. So there's dollars being put in to get, it really is smaller school districts, but it may be available to all districts as well to share services. We're not duplicating services that maybe could be shared and be a little more efficiently used. I'll go on to 7.2, district recognitions. There's only a few at this time of year, which is typical. Special thanks to Jessica Johnson for all her hard work coordinating the Brewer Game Wellness event on Friday, June 16th. Also, thanks to the Sodexo team, Steve Cosner, Rebecca Squarback, Mike Groff, Jason Mikulski, for making this a huge success. And so that tradition is back again. So that's pretty cool. Thank you to Nate Rice and Carrie Hansen for their hard work and support of Juneteenth. We had our first vendor booth at the event on Monday, June 19th, where we distributed our district swag and engaged with students, families, and the community. Even Mayor Dan Devine came and hung out with us for a while. And there were, I think, some memorable moments, and I shared some of this with Amanda to think about if we're going to do it, if you'll do it again in the future. But the one I keep talking about is as a float went by, there was a woman on the float that started yelling West Allis, and I looked up and she said, "I'm a Central parent. I'm so proud you're here." And you could hear her yelling down the street. No, she was so enthusiastic that we were present, and she saw Central High School as well, the Black Student Union. The other thing I thought was an interesting note is, we had our tent with all the swag and then the Black Student Union. And when the Central students showed up, that's when people stopped at the Black Student Union to talk. But when the adults were there, they didn't have much action. They wanted to talk to the kids about it. And a lot of the questions was, can anybody join? Which I thought was fascinating, meaning from any school. So we're doing interesting and I think powerful work. And I was really proud of the young people that showed up. Wow, they did a good job representing us. Even though, the end of the event ended in some violence, there was violence everywhere. It doesn't mean we shouldn't show up and be present, but we have to be careful. But everybody from Amanda to the planning to Nate and Carrie, just a phenomenal job. It was worth every bit of effort that went into it. And then from the music department, congratulations to Nathan Hill graduate Shining Strings and Symphonia member Ella McGinley, who was recently honored with a Dean Podekar Award for the Milwaukee Youth Symphony Orchestra. She has been a member of MISO for 6 years, as heading to UW-Eau Claire to study double bass performance and music education. This award is given to MISO seniors who demonstrate leadership and service in the MISO family and within their own communities. And then 7.3, just some quick updates. There were no public comments at our meeting on June 12th, so nothing to follow up there. A little bit on school consolidation. So the RFP related to the redevelopment of Longfellow, that's moving forward. And so that process will, like we've talked about in the past, engage the city as proposals come in and eventually bring proposals forward to the board through your process. And then the planning process at Lane continues with the goal of putting out an RFP for the unused portion. So there's some steps there that have to be taken to really understand what will be turned into the next Recreation and Community Services Center. And then there will probably be a process of pursuing zoning changes for the remainder of the property, but the ultimate goal the board supported was getting part of that back on the tax rolls. I think that'll be an important part of the story and future referenda to support facility improvements, that we return some of the property that are underutilized or not used to the tax rolls. And then a couple other updates. The City of West Allis fireworks at Nathan Hale, that's moving forward, and Aaron's there to give us a little update on that because he's a lot closer to it at this point, given that I won't be around on July 4th.
Thanks, Dr. Lexman. So at this point, all systems are a go. We received the official certificate of insurance from City Attorney Decker at the City of West Allis. So we got that all taken care of. That's been filed with our insurance company and I guess documented on our end in the finance department. Steve Eichmann, who's here tonight, he's been working with the city directly, the city planning commission, the fireworks contractor, the police department, and public works. They had their first walk through the property to kind of go through where things would go, mainly to talk about the flow of traffic. So if you're thinking about 116th, if you're coming from Lincoln, you'll turn left into the first parking lot. If you're coming from Cleveland, you'll turn right, and the police department will have barricades up, and those will be the main entrances and exits. If you were to leave, same process. If you're going towards Lincoln, you'll leave that way. You cannot go the other way. Just kind of some logistics there. And the other piece that Steve and I talked about during his walkthrough, the first walkthrough of 2, is where snow fencing will go, blocking off the areas we discussed about. There's not going to be people on the turf field. The soccer field will be off limits because the bleachers is not fenced for families to be able not to go on the soccer fields, but the bleachers for the football field you can, because there's an additional fence barrier. So kind of going through logistics to kind of make sure they know where things will go. The city on their end will be installing or having porta potties delivered. They'll be putting up the fence themselves. And it seems like on that end, everything's ready to go. The city's also working with the Booster Club directly to get those systems in place and walk through those plans with them as well. So at this point, that's what we have to report. I believe Steve's meeting with them later this week to finalize those plans and kind of get those things done before a final walkthrough is in place.
Thanks, Aaron. And then just a final thank you, like I said before, recognition of the honor that, there's a million reasons you show up as an educator. At the end of the day, there's really only one, and to make a difference in the lives of kids. And that's what I encourage you to keep doing. It's been powerful 8 years of work, and you have a lot more work ahead of you. But if you stay focused on that one piece, yeah, you can make a difference in the lives of kids. So thanks. That concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you very much. Now we move on to item 8, our public comments this evening. There is no one signed up for public comments at this time. If someone had come late via Zoom and would like to participate in public comments and address the board, I'll leave 30 seconds for those to sign up, which should be a link in the chat of Zoom right now in order to do so. And in those 30 seconds, I'm gonna do something real quick. I'll be right back. Seeing that no one has signed up for public comments, we'll close public comments at this time. And we will move on to item 9, our board reports for this evening, starting with 9.1, review of the board calendar. So today is June 26th, 6 p.m. We have a regular Board of Education meeting where we have action on our proposed 23-24 budget and preliminary tax levy number 2. And then immediately following, we have a closed session meeting. On July 10th at 6 p.m., we have a regular Board of Education meeting. And then July 17th at 6 p.m., we have a board workshop, topic to be determined. And then on July 24th, 6 p.m., we have a regular Board of Education meeting. Moving on to 9.2, our board committee reports, starting with 9.2.1, communications and community relations. Ms. Deal.
All right, so our committee met this evening, right before this meeting. And so we discussed a couple of things. The first one we talked about is we reviewed the incoming superintendent communication plan. Just talked about some of the messaging you want to do about Dr. Robinson starting on July 1st. Today, he worked on doing a video where he was answering some questions from kids that were pre-recorded before school was let out. Looking at July 12th for the board, Dr. Robinson will be presenting his 90-day plan for the district. So plan on being here. And then I talked about just maybe doing some podcasts, just different kind of messaging around with him here coming in. Also, where he's looking at having a like a get to know you kind of session at all the schools with families, communities, stuff like that. So we reviewed that. We then talked about our annual report. The annual report is going well. It's currently Tess Thompson is back from maternity leave. She's been working on a design. So we should have a rough draft to present to the board sometime in July. And we're looking to get them hopefully printed and out about mid-August, so before school starts. So that's the goal. One other thing that we did mention is we just provided some feedback to Dr. Stewart about workshops around the workshops we have with our kids. It's kind of like the two different committees, so life readiness committee and communications kind of work together on this and scheduling the workshops where we have the kids come in and present. So we just talked about what might be some better ways of having the kids present to us so we can hear them better, but they don't have to keep repeating themselves. So we kind of shared some different ideas around that. And what we talked about.
That meeting on the 100-day plan is July 10th,
Thank you.
not the 12th.
You're right. It's July 10th. It was July 12th on the paper, but yeah, so July 10th, because July 12th is a Wednesday. So July 10th.
July 10th.
Thank you.
That's a 100-day or 90-day plan.
90 days.
90-day, whatever.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we have
Yeah, sorry, yeah, it was, yeah, we had July.
missing 10 days here.
Anything else like you guys want us to talk about?
Does that conclude your,
Yes, that concludes my.
any questions for Ms. Deal or the committee regarding the report? Any further questions, I should say, or clarifications? Or any topics to be considered at future agenda items? Seeing none. Oh, exciting. Mr. Keller, so 9.2.2 employee engagement and culture. Mr. Keller, are you prepared to present?
I think actually I'm going to present.
You're going to present, Brendan?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Right.
Please commence with your.
I wasn't sure where we were at. So anyways, my first time. No, but we met on the 20th of June. And our meeting was pretty short. We mostly focused on exit interview items that data that had been collected up to that point, and comparing it to the 21-22 school year to this year. The reasons for people leaving stayed actually pretty consistent, or were kind of the similarities in there. And with the reason for resignations being new positions, relocation, and career change / leaving education were our top 3 reasons for resignation. And then the decision to leave that we had this for this school year was the personal and family, salary, and then career change again was our big piece, which the top 2 are the same as last year. Lack of support was the other one from last year. And then if the other piece that we talked about was there anything that would keep our teachers from leaving, and the top 3 were salary, nothing, and then higher expectations for the student, which the first and third were the same this year to last year. And a change in assignment was the one that was popped up last year. And so we talked a little bit about kind of looking at what we could do to help shift that, and especially with the salary and the nothing and higher expectations, looking into seeing what kind of other supports that maybe we need to put into the teacher work days to take some things off the plate maybe, or reorganize in some way, just getting something out there so that we are taking a little bit off of them so they're not feeling, because we're a little worried that the nothing piece is that there's burnout. Right, and so, but just, we're gonna do a little bit more collecting and seeing if we can talk to some more teachers and see if we can talk to some more people about getting some information about that. The other piece that we talked about was our substitute fill rates, because as we know, last year we updated our salaries for that. And the grand scheme of things, our 22-23 and 21-22 school years looked virtually identical as far as our fill rates went. And actually, if there hadn't been a couple of COVID outbreaks in the 21-22 school year, we would have actually needed more subs this year than we did last year. And so trying to figure out what was going on with that. Our unfilled percentage was still around 40%. And so with that, again, we're trying to see if our updated salary actually helped with keeping us on par with other districts, or if it actually, if it didn't actually do anything. So we're looking to see if we can find a little bit more data for that as well. And that's all we talked about. So that's all I have to report.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Burns regarding his report? So you had mentioned about looking in, and I would be interested to know if other districts increase their sub pay as well, or if we only increased it to what they were already at, and so then we were just then basically competing for what type of job they were subbing for versus more pay and the type of job.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of our intent with talking about it, is where was our sub pay at, and then whether or not that was, you know, at a higher spot, and if it was, did we just manage, or did we somewhere in between?
Right. Did we make any adjustments for inflation?
I don't know. I'll have to ask Mariana about that.
Without how high inflation is, I don't know if other districts did or not as well, but again, as far as comparison goes, if when we make increases to salary, do we also increase the sub pay rates by that same percentage? interested to know. Any other questions for Mr. Burns or any additional items for him to consider moving forward? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Burns. I think you filled in admirably. Moving on to 9.3, board member reports of community events. Any community events the board members would like to report on since last meeting? Ms. Kaiser?
My husband and I were able to attend the Brewers game, and it was really, really fun. I didn't even know this was a tradition that had been happening in the past, but absolutely loved it. We had a great time. For us, it was a kid-free event, so it was kind of cool to see the Brewers in that light for once. So thank you so much to everyone who ran it. I thought it was a very successful and really fun event.
Yeah, I was disappointed. I was going to be out of town for it. I missed all the fun things, and I was the one time I leave town. Thank you for that. And anyone else have any events they would like to report on? Mr. Becker.
My family and I also went to the Brewer game with our kids, so we had similar but not similar experiences. It was enjoyable though, seeing all the teachers getting together and just having a good time socially. And a lot of those teachers are my kids' former teachers, so that was also really enjoyable to see. Also made it down to the Juneteenth booth for a few hours.
Right.
That was really good energy around it from everybody who was there. I know I've made some friends over at the central building, so that was nice. I've gotten to know those guys pretty well, and that was really good. I was disappointed I didn't get to see the students who were there, but all in all, I was really happy to be a part of it.
Right, fantastic. Yeah, thank you for representing for the board as well by being able to attend again. I wasn't on it. It's like really the 4 days I wasn't here. Everything happened. So thank you for going. Anything else that anyone else would like to report on? Right, seeing none, we'll move on to 9.4 other updates and information items, which is for me. And I actually do have one. I'd like to invite Representative Vining up to the podium.
All right, how does this work? Is it just automatically on?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, should I just talk?
Yes, please.
I'm State Representative Robin Vining. I'm honored to now represent West Allis, and I represent Wauwatosa and West Allis. For 4 years, I represented Wauwatosa, Brookfield, and Milwaukee. And with this new district, I'm really honored to represent West Allis. So I'm super excited to be here tonight. Thank you for your patience. I was coming from an event downtown, and we had our plaque was coming from the Capitol, and we were trying to meet outside the building. So thank you for your patience. I do want to note, I have office hours once a month and would love to meet with you. I was able to meet with Mr. Lee recently. If you can't make a daytime appointment, I would always be happy to get together another time. So just let me know. I want to be supportive to you guys and do what I can to help from the Capitol. So thank you all for your work. Dr. Lexman, it is my honor to be here tonight to honor you and to honor your work. We in this state believe that every child has the right to a well-funded, fantastic public education. And it is our job to ensure that. And I thank you for dedicating so much of your time and your life to doing just that. I would like to read to you what we have put together with gratitude. Whereas the West Allis, West Milwaukee School District serves over 7,500 students, and whereas the West Allis, West Milwaukee School District is comprised of a diverse group of students from West Allis, West Milwaukee, and portions of Greenfield and New Berlin, who are taught with an emphasis on deeper learning that provides students with a purposeful, authentic learning experience in an equitable environment. And whereas Dr. Marty Lexman became superintendent of the West Allis, West Milwaukee School District in 2015 and served until his retirement in 2023. And whereas Dr. Lexman previously served as the Central Office Administrator for Milwaukee Public Schools, as well as the Superintendent for the Kohler and the Shorewood School Districts. And whereas under the leadership of Dr. Lexman, schools emphasize meeting the social needs of students, increasing mental health and counseling services, and addressing the persistent achievement gaps. And therefore, be it resolved by Representative Robin Vining on behalf of the Wisconsin State Legislature hereby commends Dr. Lexman for his service to the West Allis, West Milwaukee School District, congratulates him on his contributions to the students he so proudly served, and wishes him well in his retirement. Dated this date, June 26th of 2023. Please let me know if any of that is incorrect. We'll fix it. I am the daughter of a public school teacher, the wife of a public university professor, the mother of 2 students who are finishing their careers in K-12, and I am deeply grateful for your work.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
Good. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. Yes. All right, well. Yep, thank you. Well, that was the majority of the items that I wanted to talk about. Other than to say, just for myself personally, I have enjoyed working with you, Dr. Lexman, over the years. And you've definitely been a positive influence on this district and has been enumerated in many ways this evening, all the great accomplishments you have done, the position that you've set us up for in the future. And I thank you for myself as a parent, as a taxpayer, and as someone who is going to be helping to continue this district moving forward. Thank you for that work. And thank you for positioning us in this way that we have flexibility and ability to pivot when we need to, which is not something that I can say when I joined the board or obviously when you joined the district. So thank you so much for that. So with that, I will close 9.4 for this evening and move on to item 10, our consent agenda, starting with 10.1, approval of minutes from regular Board of Education meeting on June 12th. 10.2, our employment summary, 10.3, supplementary contracts, and 10.4, our financial summary. Does anyone need anything separated out?
Move to approve. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Brian, go
Aye.
ahead. We can't hear him.
Aye.
There was audio there, so I'm presuming he said aye. Brian, if you didn't say, I put it in the chat. Opposed? All right, that passes. Moving on to action item, our action item evening 11, starting 11.1, approval of our CISA #1 contract for 23-24. Ms. Mirage and Ms. Sage.
You'll get used to it.
Different names, I'll figure it out, yeah.
Not a whole lot that we need to do. You've got the contract. It's a very much carryover from last year.
Okay.
With just a few exceptions as far as student services part, a few tweaks as far as how many students are attending, which programs are through CISA. We've had one student that aged up, and so that's where some of the number changes have occurred. But otherwise, it's very much a carryover of what we had already done last year for students that need alternative placement. More than what we're able to provide within the school district here.
And then the other part of the CISA 1 contract that again is a continuation from last year is being involved in the professional learning communities that you'll see on the networks in the bottom half of the contract, which is important to our growth as staff, as well as allowing teachers to also step in those lead roles and being part of those professional learning communities, as well as our connection with the Institute for Personalized Learning.
Okay, any questions?
Move to approve. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
All right, that passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to 11.2 or 23-24 preliminary budget and tax levy, Mr. Norris.
Oh, perfect. First time, that never happens. So this is probably the first time I've been back in a while to talk about the budget where I'm actually a little bit of excited today. So if you
Oh,
read the
really?
board update, I'm happy to, even before I get in, to announce we have a balanced budget this evening. So
Wow.
I almost want to applaud my team for that because it's just fantastic work and they spent the better part of the last 2 weeks working with me on that. So I just want to preface that by saying we finally have some good news. So I'm going to jump in through this tonight. I don't have a ton to share that's beyond what we've discussed the last 4 or 5 meetings. So I will keep it brief and open to questions, but we'll go through this quickly. So just want to share this evening kind of an agenda. We'll revisit the state biennial budget. Dr. Lexman hit on a bunch of the things that that I'll talk about this evening. Talk about three main things. Then we're going to talk about revenue, expenditures, and then mill rate tax levy projections. And really the hard things that we do know are the revenue and expenditures. And as you guys know, mill rate and tax levy projections are contingent on 2 more things to come through. One is equalized property value, which we usually get in July. And then the state aids are based on the equalization aid calculation, which is not calculated until after the fiscal year 20 or the school calendar 2023 is audited. So that's for shared cost reasons. So we'll get through that in a minute. So again, because of those things, it's important to know this is still in flux, but generally what we do know is revenue is determined, expenses are kind of finalized. And so the last piece is the mill rate and tax levy. So not new information. This is the first year of the state biennial budget, which will span from 23 through 25. Currently, there's been an agreement between the Joint Finance Committee and Governor Evers, and this includes many of the unanswered questions that we had on June 12th. And this evening, all expenditures are included this evening, and a majority of the revenue is now allocated based on the tentative budget agreement. And I wrote pending Governor Evers' veto power, which we believe essentially this is as bad as it will get. Right. That's kind of the way that we've been communicated from Barrett with. So he does have veto power to provide schools with more revenue K-12, which he could do. Okay. So as Dr. Lexman mentioned, is legislative updates. What we do know is the school districts across the state have gotten or will receive about $1 billion in spendable revenue for K-12 education, including $325 per pupil in each fiscal year, $50 million for reading and literacy outcomes K-12, $30 million to support mental health service grants, an increase of 3.3% of reimbursed for special education. It previously was about 30%, so an increase there. The low revenue ceiling, and then the increase in vouchers that I discussed on June 12th. So some of the highlights I want to just hit on because I talked about these last board meeting, and these are the answers we got, which some of them are good and green, some of them are red and bad, and some of them are yellow to be determined, right? So one, the question we had on the 12th was, will the low revenue ceiling go from 10,000 to 11 in year 1 or year 2? The answer was year 1. That's fantastic news for us. That means our year 1 increase in per pupil is not 325, it's 433. That's great news for a district that has a low revenue ceiling, or a district that is considered property poor to the state. So that you start to see kind of where Governor Evers is pivoting, like, you know, you win a battle to lose the war, kind of that thinking. So he may have got the shared revenue for the city of Milwaukee, but part of his agreement with the state was like, I'm going to get the most money for school districts with the lowest revenue ceilings to be impacted. So essentially districts that have poor property tax bases. That's a good thing for us, right? Will there be additional dollars in categorical aid increases? The answer is no. Governor Evers asked for $24 in each year. The answer that was not in the agreement. The unknown is with the $50 million literacy and $30 million mental health agreements. We don't know how and when those dollars will be distributed and in what manner. And that's really important because in previous budget agreements, the state legislatures allowed school districts to use those dollars to both supplement and supplant. And what they would do is they'd say, if you received $1 million, 50% had to be for supplemental services, and $50 million or the other portion could be for supplanted services. What I mean by that is, like, we already have a school psychologist. Can we use the grant to pay for their salary and benefits? The answer could be yes. Some dollars are allocated by saying, no, it has to be additional staff, additional services. So that's to be determined. And school districts across the state have and will use those dollars if they can supplant to balance budgets. Tonight, these are not included in the budget. It's unknown. And then lastly is, will the 33% in special ed reimbursement be included year 1 or year 2? That is year 1, which is great news for us again, because we have a higher than average special education population as part of our percent of total enrollment. So that's great news for us to receive essentially 33 cents off every dollar we spend for a student with special needs. Expense overview, we've discussed this before, so I won't spend too much time, but essentially these are the expenses that are outlined in our budget. 5% increase for all staff, comp model increases, obviously a reduction in staff line with enrollment, health insurance benefit increase to 2.5%. Dental, utility costs, service department increases. Schools are still currently on this budget allocated at 75%. This is one of the main priorities as we go through the summer here. This is an area that we'll continue to look at because that's possible for schools to run building budgets at that percent, but something we definitely know is difficult for them. So if there's extra dollars, certainly that's something I would look at, recommending to the board that we do. To get schools to 100%, you're looking at about 370,000-ish total revenue or total dollars to do that. So something to consider. The increases for private vouchers, charter and open enrollment, and then debt defeasance with which is great, no ESSER fiscal cliff. Okay, so I want to just highlight this. On June 12th, this was one of the scenarios I presented to the board. And I said, this in my opinion was what I thought was most likely to happen. And this is what it produced. So this exact scenario produced around a $470,000 deficit. So when I say the team was really trying to dive in to figure out how can we balance this, this is where we started at, right? About just under $500,000. So how do we get to balance? Well, one, the revenues came through with a low revenue ceiling. We got the confirmation of the 33.3%. But one thing that we dove into with the assistance of Mark Duff was this is a great example of why districts that have significant fund balances in a high interest market can really use those dollars to work for them. So what I mean by that, in previous years, prior to interest rates being increased by the federal government, we on average made about $50,000 to $80,000 in a year in interest earnings. Okay. So when we moved money in March we moved $30 million into a public CD, 3 different CDs. In those 3 months, we made about 400,000. Right. And so when we looked at that, we thought, hey, 700,000 seemed to be a reasonable amount for us to budget, assuming you're making projections now that the interest rates won't go back. But if you extrapolate that out, you're looking at $90,000 a month. So 700,000 is a conservative amount. It likely could be over $1 million pending interest rates don't pull back. So one of the recommendations from Baird was to take 60-ish% of what you think it will be and budget that, because if it comes in low, you're safe, and then you're not creating a CD interest cliff too, right? You don't want to do that either, right? So if you make $1 million, you can save the rest to pay for future years. That same idea too. So that's really where this budget got balanced. And again, I highlight this again, no ESSER fiscal cliff, because one-time dollars, we shouldn't be using that to balance budget. So yeah, really, really great to see that. So this is what that looks like from a revenue and expense perspective. So budget priorities. So we, looking at funding the schools, instructional initiatives around math and literacy, and implementation of mental health dollars are really the next 3 things I want to look at. And those are really to be determined from the budget. But, if we can supplant, that would be a great opportunity to balance the schools out. I think, at this point, they know that they're planning the summer for 75%, and they're well aware of that. And I think going back to them in July or August with hey, even if it's to 80%, I mean, anything will help. So I think looking at that in the summer, and then additionally, as I mentioned, the 2 other initiatives from Governor Evers. So tax levy mill rate, this is still a projection at this point, again, until we receive aid estimates and equalized property value. But you can see here, this is kind of the tax levy overview from 17-18 to now. You can see that it's, besides 2021, it's been a declining tax levy, and that's consistent with declining enrollment, declining membership. As you have fewer students, your tax levy should decrease. And so the revenue limit is tied to current year membership. So the amount of kids you have this year is what you get funded with this year beyond exemptions. Aid, the saying is aid is a year delayed. That's the saying. So like current year, 22-23, the amount of money you spend dictates the amount of aid you get next year, right? So that's kind of the last dilemma, the last piece we're waiting on, because the higher our aid is, the lower our tax levy is. So this could be further decreased, given that we've done some priorities that meant spending money. The debt defeasance, we spent money, right? OPEB, we spent money, right? So things like that are increased expenses that we had planned for. So that's a good thing. But when you spend more money, you get more aid the following year. So I expect that this is probably the worst case scenario again. But again, the levy is still decreasing for taxpayers. That's a good thing. The mill rate, again, this projection here is based off a 0% equalized property value. I certainly don't expect it to be 0%, but let's just look at what scenario if it is. The mill rate would be decreasing to 6.55. Currently it's 6.57. So a decrease there again. If which would mean, sorry, not to go jump ahead quick. If the mill rate is $6.55, a property value of $100,000 means they'd pay $655 in school, the school-based portion of the property tax payment, and then 200,000 would be 1310 and so on and so forth. So essentially multiplying it by 2 or 3, depending on the value of your home. If equalized property value comes in at 5%, the projections are around that 4 to 6, depending on the municipality you live in. You can see essentially the mill rate would decrease by 5%. It's consistent. It's a correlated formula. So then the mill rate would be about $6.24. So again, a decrease. And then that same multiple will be true. So with that, I will pause and take questions from the board.
Just huge thank you to your team that, you come in today and you can have it down to $1. So I really applaud you guys.
Yeah. Thanks, Kristen.
Other questions? I have one. If the agreed upon budget is signed into law as is, there is an increase in the voucher school, in choice school dollar amount that gets sent, which is more than we currently send. Has it been cleared up where that difference comes from? Because if we only get $11,000 and they go somewhere they get $12,000, where's that $1,000 coming from?
Yeah, that's a good question. So at this point, my understanding is that the district is at the burden to pay for that. And so that's currently a lot of discussions going on. I also believe it's currently being discussed that it might be litigated by SWSA around that, from districts that are low revenue districts to do that. So there's been some bipartisan discussion from what I've heard. Again, it's hearsay that districts who have a low revenue below those amounts might receive credits for the difference. So it's to be determined. So we could receive additional dollars, but today's budget includes just what you're asking, President Lee, around like if we get 11,000 and we pay 12,000, this includes 12,000. So at the worst, we're still balanced. At the best, we might have additional revenue in the amount of unknown at this point. It's unbelievable though. I can see what you're, yeah.
It's frankly ridiculous.
Yeah.
That we're underfunded as it is, and now we're supposed to pay more money to private and voucher schools so that we have less money and less students that we're educating. So that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And then we don't I'm thinking back to how many years I've been on the board. I think this is the first time that we've had a balanced budget at this point. Usually we're approving a deficit budget with the understanding that there's unknowns, health insurance, things like that we don't know yet. And so once we get to October, we always budget at that point that was balanced. But so having it balanced at this point is great. So with that go, Ms. Kaiser's kudos to yourself and your team for getting this done. And then you watching closely what finally comes out from this budget when things are all said and said and done, and what the property comes back at. So we know what we're kind of floating with that.
Absolutely.
Do we have any other questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Thank you very much. Then we're going to move forward to 11.3, 23-24 district-wide community eligibility provision. Mr. Norris.
Okay, so the community eligibility provision was first approved by the board last June. And what that is, it's referred to in schools as CEP. And so school districts who have a high enough percentage, and some districts you have to qualify, I think it's 60% of the district, and or you could have certain, if you didn't meet that criteria district-wide, certain schools could be considered CEP by meeting that threshold. So some districts have a third of their schools meeting the criteria and some districts don't. So essentially what it means is our district qualifies as CEP district-wide. And what it allows us to do is, as a school board, as a school district, is to approve all students across the district, regardless of their free and reduced status, to eat breakfast and lunch for free. So last year, given our excess fund balance, which is defined by DPI as an excess of 3 months operating expenses. So for us, that's about just under $1 million. Our Fund 50, which is federal dollars for food service. We had a fund balance that exceeded the 3 months. So DPI then says, hey, you need kind of the tap on the wrist. You need to figure out a plan to spend that down. So one of our objectives this year was, hey, if we move to CEP all district wide, families who would have paid will not have to anymore. And then that would help eat down the cost. So the good news is that, I guess the good and bad, depending how you look at it, is the good news is that, you know, the meal reimbursements are based on the number of kids that eat. So that's an unknown number. I don't know how many kids are going to eat next year, right? It depends on who wants to eat, who's hungry, I guess, right? So our initial projections were that it would cost about 600,000, and Sodexo in our contract has a 475,000 guarantee, meaning that whatever that comes in at, they're going to guarantee we have a surplus of 475. Now, if we spend in the excess of that, it would eat into the carryover, but what it actually cost us in real dollars this year, projection was 394,000 when we thought it'd be 600,000. So actually our excess fund balance is going to increase while doing this. So the good news is that it's sustainable and that our families can continue to eat for free. So that's my recommendation to the board, to continue that program for next year.
Questions or comments from the board?
Just happy that we can offer this to our families again.
Yeah, it makes a difference for families, and we'll probably never know the impact, but I think it's a great thing to do. So
I think it's really important because I think there's people who don't sign up for free and reduced lunch that need it. And that this it removes a barrier to food, which I think is really important. Any other comments or questions, or I'd look for a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, that passes. Thank you very much. Moving on to 11.4, 23-24 district property liability and workers' compensation insurance. Mr. Norris.
Okay, thank you. This is again an annual item that the board reviews and reviews for approval in about this time of the year, for essentially to maintain property liability and workman's comp insurance through the fiscal year. So a couple things to note: the total decrease from 22-23 to 23-24, mainly because we have a declining enrollment. So there's less liability in our schools. That's how the insurance company looks at it. I don't consider students liabilities, but they do, right? So about a 3% decrease. It's about $30,000. So it came in under budget, which is great. Again, helped with the balanced budget, not significantly, but did help. The other thing to point at too is we try to keep a pulse on workman's comp claims. And so in the workman's comp world, they call that an MOD rating. And so we have seen that going down in past years. And so this year it went from, or last year was 1.24, this year's 1.29. So pretty consistent. A 0.04 increase is, one other person got hurt at work. And so certainly not a good thing, but stuff that we need to look at and continue to work on and try to put safety things in place for people to just be as safe as they can at work. And so, but overall, I mean, I think we have a good relationship with Marsha McLennan and our workman's comp carrier, and they shop our rates every year. And so we've seen that decrease every year. So at this point, I feel like it's a good thing that we look to approve that. So.
Questions from the board? I'd look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. Now 11.5, future school consolidations. Mr. Norris and Dr. Lutz, did you have any?
I'll do a tiny introduction.
Okay.
Turn it over to Aaron, because obviously this is forward leaning. And so it makes more sense for Aaron to have the conversation with the board. But the board, when it approved the consolidation of 3 schools, did commit to future conversations about consolidations, other school consolidations that were described in the facility master plan, right? So that and the board committed to reviewing, reconsidering what those may be. We think it makes sense to move that even further into the future, given that, we're just allowing the dust to settle on these 3 schools. There's a major new apartment development most likely to come online near Franklin, right there on National Avenue. So there's some dynamics that have shifted, and we think it makes some sense to not abandon the facility master plan, but given kind of, I think what Aaron will explain, move that further out to allow some other pieces to kind of sort themselves out. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Aaron.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. for the intro. And so, yeah, as Dr. Lexon mentioned, I think there's a couple of things to note that I think are just worth some weight and some consideration. I don't think there's any one good reason why, but I think when you kind of put them all together, it makes some sense and some linear thinking here. So the first thing is that, again, yeah, we want to consolidate the current schools that we're working through well and focus on the student experience we have this year and into next year. I think I think that sometimes it's easy to think, oh, the schools are closed now. The kids are at their new neighborhood schools and the work's done. I don't look at it that way. I think a lot of families are going to be transitioning when the normal transitions are K4, our 6th grade, and our 9th grade, or our new students, right? So now we have a few thousand students going to be transitioning to new schools next year. I think we need to focus on their experience and work with the school leaders, the student services staff, and the incoming staff there to make sure that those families are well situated and that their experiences are as they expect them to be from a parent's perspective too. So that's the first kind of main reason. The second one is, from a financial position, I don't believe that at this point, given kind of our discussions and our position financially, this is a main factor in doing this. At this point, I feel like our financial position is strong, and this is not a knee jerk reaction to having to close schools, right? The last one is kind of looking at the high schools. Our current 7th graders, consolidating a high school at this point is not viable until our current 7th grade, 23, 24 7th graders are even in 11th grade. So we're still at minimum 4 years out before it's even possible. So to me, pushing this out 2-3 years is completely appropriate to be able to have that discussion. And lastly, I think the board, the administration, the staff, the school district, the communities has made really, really, really hard decisions to close schools. Like closing one school is really hard. It affects hundreds of families. It affects alumni. It affects kids in the schools. It affects siblings, things like that. So I think at this point, moving forward and celebrating where we're at and trying to move forward and have good things. Dr. Robinson's joining us here this week, but officially next week with us. And I think we have a lot of work to do and a lot of things to celebrate. And I think giving Dr. Robinson some time to get his feet in the ground and learn the community it is another just great reason. But lastly, and maybe most importantly, I want to mention is that when I talked, I think in end of May around the state budget and kind of where we're at just as a district and just honestly K-12 education, more and more districts are going to be looking to go to referendum here. And I think a lot of them are going to be looking at November 24. So I think our administration, our board, our community, we've been telling the facility story, which why Steve's up here tonight to talk a little bit about. He's been working on updating our long range facility master plan to, I guess, include the schools we've closed because it's changed now. But then also what's changed is inflation, right? So there's reduction and addition, right? So it's kind of that process. But I do think given our position with financially with energy efficiency, Shelley Strasser and her team will be coming to present here in a few months on the Lane project, the recreation project at Lane. There's going to be a real opportunity for us to both meet some of the facility needs, and it's a story we've been telling. We closed 3 schools. The facility needs at the schools we have are going to be our schools, and so now we have to fix them. And so, one, having the ability to go to the community and ask for referendum dollars to fix our schools, potentially at no tax impact, is a great opportunity. But doing that amidst closing schools is not something that anyone would advise. It's a difficult thing to do. And so, one, we don't need to. 2, it's still the challenges we talked about when we initially looked at closing 4 schools. And kind of amidst all the other reasons is why I really strongly feel like pushing that down the road is makes the most sense to me. So, Steve, anything to add to that?
Oh, I think you summarized it very well.
Right. Didn't mean to steal your thunder. Sorry.
Questions from the board?
I don't have a question, I have a comment. Is that okay?
Yeah, I guess.
No.
I'll allow it.
Stop. No, I just wanted to say that, as a parent, as when I think of a child from Madison that's going over to Walker, I actually really like this idea of pushing it out, because we also have to remember that not only do we have families that are transitioning over to a grade school. Now my daughter will transition to a new middle school that will be brand new to us because Lane's not there anymore. So I think giving a little bit more leeway and providing time for some of our families who are transitioning, you know, if that impacts their families again, that's one thing I just want to say. I think that's really good. I also think if we do push it out, I would really like to see us do a really good job of really researching what our community wants. Because I know, you know, we even talked about like closing, you know, going into one high school. Is that really what the community wants? So if we're looking to eventually down the line go for referendum again, even if it doesn't really impact like, you know, tax dollars, like you're saying, I'd still like to make sure that we have a really good idea of what do people really want so that we can steer it in the direction of what the community is looking for.
I would agree, Amy. I would agree. And I think having the ability to go back to the community potentially in November of 24 to say, we made those hard decisions and the schools we are going to keep have the facilities we told you about 4 years ago. And so to have that discussion, potentially to have the discussion around staff wages and benefits. And that's going to be a real thing too, to consider of we want to keep great teachers in our schools and great schools come from great teachers. So how do we do that? And so I think there's an opportunity there to do as well. And I think it's like A to B, right? We had to close schools. And now we got to fix our schools that we're going to keep. It's pretty easy to understand, I think so.
So we're talking about delaying this. How long are we looking to delay it for?
Yeah, sorry. And the recommendation is the end of the 25-26 school year.
So by then we would have the board would at least by then revisit the question of an additional elementary and what's going to happen with the high schools. Is that accurate?
Yes, and I believe I included language that like it could still be considered by the board. Before that, continue to review and discuss the possibility and approve a plan no later than. So like, it's not like the board, or we could still discuss that if we feel like it's appropriate at a later date prior to that, so.
Okay. And then as far as November 24 for referendum, is there any plans for work about starting the planning of that process to, you know, get updated figures, numbers and looking up, you know, how much money we would be looking to utilize for the no tax impact or minimal tax impact, and then where we'd want to put that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I along with Dr. Stewart and Mr. Eichmann here, we've been working with Bray Architects and who's Wofford with? Is he with Bray? Is Matt Wofford? Yeah, with Bray Architects and also Baird Financial to start the analysis and start putting together draft timelines communications. So that started about 2 months ago. So the next steps really we're fairly close to being able to put together kind of a comprehensive draft plan for the board to see. So the next steps in July, I'll take that to the finance committee. Dr. Stewart will take that to her committee as well. And then really we'll look to have Bray and Baird Financial come in August at some point to start looking at like a kind of a comprehensive view of what that would look like and start to give the board some concrete numbers, some draft plans, some potential questions, some options. Let's just start getting our feet wet a bit. And then I think the work of the team would be to, if the board feels like that's appropriate to, I guess, informally keep moving on, then we would start to look to put like concrete plans together around surveys and as Ms. Steele mentioned, things like that to really get a clear sense of what the community potentially would support. So.
Okay. The other thing that strikes me about this, when you're talking specifically about the high schools, we know there's high needs as far as updated facilities and CIP costs of those high schools. Do we know, Mr. Eichmann, do you know if we have anything that's on the horizon in that time frame that might be a high dollar item that we would potentially be on the hook for because we're, you know, pushing this decision that would potentially require to be done? So I just want to make sure that we're not that we're not thinking about it, but like, you know, if there's $1 million plus thing that happens with one of our high schools that we have to take care of, you know, how are we going to address that? So is there anything that you're aware of, or if not, if we can look at that so that when we're talking about these plans, we can make sure to include that in there?
There isn't anything at this point that we're seeing that's coming up that we anticipate that's going to be that large of an item. We'll still continue to do the roofing and, you know, different things like that. But as we've talked about in the past before as well, when we do the roofing projects at a site, we don't do the entire roof on any one building.
Sure.
So we have it like, you know, a building the size of Hale or Central, maybe broken down into 12 or 13 different sections. So on any given year, we may do 2 or 3 sections, which is more manageable in terms of dollar, but it also allows us to do multiple sites in 1 year then as well. Other than that, you know, a lot of our equipment that, you know, you've heard about before is just old. And so we're doing everything we can to keep it, you know, keep it working. But there isn't anything that we're aware of at either the high schools that's coming up where we're saying, well, we're going to have to spend, you know, $3, $4, $5, $6 million within the next 5 years, or we're going to be in big trouble.
Okay.
We're not aware of anything like that.
Okay. Right. Well, if you become aware of anything like that, please let us know.
Say something.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? If not, I would look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. And then we are going to move on to 11. Thank you very much, gentlemen. 11.6, approve board policy updates from July 2022 is a second reading. Dr. Lexman, and it says and others. I don't know if there are any others, but
I don't believe so. This is the second reading of a set of policy updates as recommended by Neola. And we've worked through the first reading process, right? So they're held in committee for 30 days. There have been no questions from any board members, no questions from the public. So they're in front of you to consider as a second reading, which with approval would make them now the official policies.
okay. And no changes from the first reading.
There's no changes from the first reading.
Okay. Questions from the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. Okay, well, that ends the business portion of our meeting at this point. I am going to, we'll move into close with the motion and so forth, and then we'll take a 5-minute recess, okay? So I would look up for a motion and a second. To go
moved.
I have to read the whole thing.
Oh, go ahead.
Into executive session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85, parent 1, parent F, for the purpose of considering a student disciplinary expulsion order, which if discussed in public would be likely to have a substantial effect upon the reputation of the student involved.
So moved. Second.
All right, and then we need a roll call for that.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mr. Burns,
Yes.
Mrs. Lee is excused, Mrs. Carr is excused, Mr. Sickich,
Yes.
Mr. Becker,
Yes.
Mr. Keller,
Yes. Yes.
he's in favor.
Yes.
And Ms. Steele
Yes.
and President Lee.
Yes. All right, and now we'll take a 5-minute recess to turn everything off and move to closed session. Thank you very much.